looking at the interview suite at S4. It's kept dark for the comfort of the aliens. The figure who is just barely visible in the left foreground is the telepath, and behind the camera is a raked seating area for observers. Although in this case, I believe the only other person present was a military aide. The alien is seated behind a glass partition in a biocontainment area, which is maintained at Biosafety Level 2, the lowest designation. That's primarily for the protection of the aliens, not us. The theory is that if they were going to infect us with an alien bug, it would have happened 50 years ago. In fact, all the indications are the aliens eliminated microbial and viral life from their own ecosystem long ago. They aren't susceptible to our diseases directly, but it has been shown that microbes can reproduce and form colonies within their respiratory systems, which tends to exacerbate the debilities they seem to suffer anyway in our environment. In fact, you can see here the alien is beginning to flag. The interview was not going well. The telepath was trying to clarify some points from a previous interview, but he wasn't receiving coherent responses. As you can see, the being is in real distress. At this point, the telepath is sending out a message to the medical staff. He's trying to communicate with the alien, but he's getting no response. There's very little he can do. There's no direct connection between his space and the biocontainment area. That's the aide stepping in on the right. The medical staff should be there by now. They're slow in responding. There they are. I have to say the medical personnel at S4 are less than first rate. They tend to be selected for their willingness to keep secrets rather than their medical competence. By the way, he's not shining that light into the eyes. It looks that way, but in fact he's checking for hemorrhaging around the eye sockets and in the nasal cavity. I'm sorry. It's very hard for me to watch this.
Stumbled into this book. It came to us to be written. Suddenly we were in a wave of waves. UFOs were being seen across the country again. We were in what they call a flap. And people began experiencing things that they couldn't explain. Something was happening in our skies in the midst of Watergate, Agnew, the energy crisis, the Middle East. Something was happening and people couldn't understand what it was. We spoke about UFOs, but nobody really knew. And then it hit right here where we are. It hit Pascagoula. Charlie Hickson entered the news, and we had a book to write.
We were sitting on the other side of the pier with our feet, over toward the river, fishing in the river. And the fish still wasn't biting, so I told Calvin, I said, well, we might as well go home. I guess that was when I heard it. It was some kind of zipping sound. And when I turned around, in this area out here, about 40 or 50 feet out there, there was some kind of craft, it looked like it's going to come right onto the ground. But it came on down and hovered about a foot and a half or 2 feet off of the ground. We didn't know what to do, the river behind us and that out there not knowing what it was. So, and then before we had time to really do anything, it seemed like an opening appeared. Toward the end, it was, toward us. And the blue light, it had blue flashing lights as it was, approaching the ground, but then they went out. And when the opening appeared, some source of light came from the inside. It was just almost blinding.
Sheriff Diamond, can you tell me just what happened that night?
No, sir, I can't.
All I can tell you is there was two men came into the sheriff's department approximately 8:30 and 9 o'clock. They were all excited and upset, wanting to climb the walls, hysterical, crying. That's actually all I know is what happened. I mean, as far as me seeing what happened, I don't know.
We could see them in the opening coming from, you know, when it started out to craft. But
Did you
I
think it
couldn't
was
tell.
people coming out at first?
Well,
or
they had. I kind of thought it was people at first, you know, off like that. But of course, when they appeared there in front of me, it was the most shock I've ever had in my life.
What did you see?
Well, they were shorter than me. I'd say about 5'2" or 3", and they didn't have a neck. Their head, it seemed to come directly to their shoulders, and they had something that came out to a point about where a nose would be, and on each side the ears. And I believe that they looked like they were a little longer on the ears than the nose.
But still pointed the ears.
They were still pointing, yes.
But since I was down there, and since I was a physician, and several other scientists and investigators were asked to consult and look into the situation, I was asked if would I mind if I would be present, and I said I wouldn't mind at all. And while it is still very difficult for us to believe that a spaceship landed and that robot-type creatures came out and actually took these two people into the spaceship, these men, in my opinion, believe that they saw this and that they were being honest in reporting what they have reported.
But it seemed to me when they came out that doorway, or that opening, or whatever it was, then just almost instantly they were right there on us. And their arms, they had arms, and I saw the arms moving here and in the shoulders, but they had webbed. I mean, their fingers were webbed, and then they had something like a thumb, and they were like this.
Mm-hmm. We questioned them at length. And then we left the room and recorded all the conversation they had. Recorded between the two of them. And one of them kept wanting to pray. And he said, after all I went through on this earth, I said, why should I have to see something like this?
Calvin Parker, I was questioning him, and at one time he wanted to climb the wall. That's how nervous and how shook up he was.
Well, one on this arm like this, and on the other one, you know, they had my other arm like that. And I just seemed to lift up to the same height they were off the ground, and we just moved into the craft.
Now inside, how did they lay you out? Do you remember how it happened?
Yes. I didn't see any tables or chairs or anything in there. I'm not saying it wasn't in there because the light was almost blinding, but I didn't see any. And when they carried me inside, they seemed to just lean me back, you know. And this eye, well, I keep referring to it as an eye, and it moved up in front of me about this close. And it started right at my eyes, looking me right in the eye. And it hesitated there for a few seconds, and it just started moving over my entire body. When they brought me from the craft along this area here, and they didn't drop me, you know, they just released me back to the ground. And I fell. I don't know why my legs were weak. I don't know why it was the fright or what it was, but I fell onto the ground. And that's when I seen Calvin. He's standing right over here in this area, and he was standing facing the river with his arms outstretched like that, just like he was staring at something.
Can you tell me about the lie detector test?
Well, so that was run by Pilkington. Was it Pilkington?
Pennington.
Pennington.
That they run this type of test about 6 times a day. And when they were asked to come over here to talk to these people, they had in their mind that it was just a big joke. And if I understand it correctly, they ran one test on Mr. Hickson. The machine showed that he was telling the truth. Then they run another one. And then the examiner, he began to wonder himself. So he ran the third test, and he believed just what Mr. Hickson had told him.
Mr. Booth, tell me what happened that night in October.
Well, I got up and had turned off the TV and come to the front door, which you can see right behind me. Just as usual, checking to see if it was locked. So I looked out the window at the top, and naturally I saw this object above the street light out there. So naturally it caught my eye where the lights was on. I couldn't hear any racket or anything. So I opened the door after a few seconds to step out to see if I could really tell what it was. It just took off.
Can you describe it?
Well, it was round, had lights all the way around it, turning in a counter-clockwise motion. It had a dome on top with a bright light shining out through the top of it. To tell the actual figure of it or anything, you couldn't tell. You could just see the lights and the one on top.
With questions to ask you, but the first one that I want to come back to, you use the word spacecraft. How would they or you know that what they saw was actually a spacecraft?
Often the person has not actually seen the spacecraft, but often they have. A number of these cases, when they're floated through the wall of their home, through the window, through the door, again, this, so many of the details of these experiences make no sense in our kind of the Newtonian, Cartesian, Western, whatever you want to call it, notions of reality, and yet the stories are consistently described with again, the self-critical attitude that the people have, and they may see a typical unidentified flying object, a saucer-shaped or cigar-shaped vehicle on the ground of their home, emanating bright lights, or they may be taken by a small craft up into the sky to a kind of mothership, which they see very clearly. So many of them actually see the UFOs that and the insides are so uniformly described with rounded, curved walls and complicated instrument panels that it's become clear that it's some kind of craft in the sky, which they would naturally call a spacecraft.
I think people would naturally draw that inference, but to me it's still an inference. I think you might agree, we don't really know exactly what these things are.
I mean, fair enough. I mean, you could have, as we do have, very I mean, this gets really into the way of how we know anything, but or our use of language. But we call something which is seen in the sky and which seems to be moving from one place to another, we call it a spacecraft. Now, again, this has to do with where our own technology has come to. It could be created as a virtual reality and is similar, appears similar to what we already know as airplane or a certain type of aerospace vehicle, so we call it a spacecraft. But again, you know, if you want to get down to the very core of the way language structures reality for us, you could even question whether they're spacecraft.
Isn't it the case that you've described in your book cases that were reported, let's say 100 years ago, back in the 19th century, of people who talked about airships?
Well, the articles there by Jerome Clark, who's been a student of the UFO phenomenon for many years, and he went back and looked into the newspaper accounts of the airship craze of the last decade of the 19th century, and many of those vehicles would look kind of like balloons or looked like the technology of the time, but he went further than that. He actually did an exhaustive search of all of the photographs he could find and the descriptions, and lo and behold, many of them did appear very much like the current modern-day UFO, but the people of the time did not have in our culture the technological knowledge to actually see them as what they were. So he's concluded that these were probably UFOs not so different from what we're seeing now, but our perceptual development hadn't reached the point where they could be perceived the way we now can see things in the sky more or less as we at least think they are.
Right.
And again, you're raising the question whether even that's actual or constructed reality.
Well, or we could take this in so many different directions. Let's go back further into the past, because the accounts don't just begin even in the 19th century, do they?
Well, again, if you go back into the early times, you know, Ezekiel's wheel, which is now many ufologists think that was a UFO, or chariots seen in the sky, or you go back to the ferries that kidnapped people in Ireland and other countries. There is some similarities, but you're dealing there with oral traditions, and it's an easy leap of mind to say, well, we've had this going on all through the centuries and through the millennia even. The problem with that is the methods of knowing then were so different. You need to compare a phenomenon, you have to use more or less the same investigative method. And our methods now, as well as, of course, our perceptual capabilities are so different. For example, just take the matter of clinical study. The people that were reporting those experiences weren't being studied clinically. Now, we have a tradition of when somebody's had an unusual experience or something that doesn't fit, or you want to investigate, you talk to that person in great detail, you get other witnesses, what they've seen. So we have a kind of body of investigative tradition now that can document what's going on. So from that point of view, this appears to have some distinct features. It also appears, now I'm getting more into my own kind of sense of this, that this thing is entering into our reality in a more hard-edged way. In other words, that the first case that we have is the Betty and Barney Hill case, this interracial couple that was coming back from their vacation in Montreal, and they saw a craft that emanated this bright light. They actually saw the creatures in the craft. They were confronted by these creatures. They were terrified. They were taken in. Each reports various experiments that were done on their bodies, skin scrapings, probings, and the accounts compare. And since that time, more and more cases are being reported, and it appears that the phenomenon is occurring with greater frequency now than in the past. But again, we don't know that. There are reasons, if that's so, why it might be so, but we're still trying to establish how distinct is this from earlier reports.
Okay, we're recording. State line of origin? Okay, yesterday you told us you traveled, and I quote, thousands of light years to get here. Yes. Tell us the truth, or the word, or another meaning. It is truth. I thought about it. So no future. To travel in time is to travel in space. So I take it aliens took over our future, right? So you're human. Okay, so you evolved from us. So what are you doing here now? How? Okay, so how about we concentrate on your time? Try me. Wait, so you know the meaning of life? What's the difference? So you know how the universe is created? So you've seen God? Okay, illuminate us. What happens when we die? Okay, so let me get this straight. There's no death, and we all experience each other's lives, right?
Okay, so how was the universe created, and why is it so perfectly made for us? Moving on. Okay, so why do we destroy ourselves with nuclear war? Can you be more specific, please? Okay, one last thing. What about morality? What are you basing your morality on? I see. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Face speed. Forward. Face speed. Forward. Wow, sir. Are you scared of me? Because you should be. Okay, so you say you're from the future and an evolutionary descendant of humans. Yet you also say you're a different species. So, which one is it? Are you a descendant of humans or not? Then how do you know English? Answer me. If you don't answer, I'll administer another round of scopolamine until your system collapses. Do you understand? Now, how do you speak English? So you just picked up English, just like that. Because you're so smart, right? Right. So, you said you know the origin of the universe, but you did not provide an explanation. So I ask you again, how was the universe created? Answer the question. Really? But you can't create something out of nothing. Here it is. Only a creator can make something from nothing. Wait, you just contradicted yourself. So? Wait, but you said there is an origin to the universe. There it is. I caught you in a lie. This universe is not existence. It is an infinitely small part of existence. Right, so now you're talking nonsense. universe created so miraculously? This universe is a spontaneous event, but inevitable within the eternity of existence. Every event can, will, and has happened, including this universe. There are an infinite number of universes. Virtually all can harbor so-called life. This universe is, by chance, stable, and has the occasional capacity to harbor so-called life. So life just happened, right? In this universe, yes. Life, this world, is an inevitable consequence of this universe's physical properties. So are you telling me we're just random? Yes. This universe is indifferent to so-called life. How so? Life on this and every world can be destroyed at any time by a multitude of random events. Such as? 1, 2, or 2, supernova, solar flare, asteroid impact. So the universe doesn't care if we live or die? Correct. I don't believe that for a second. We're more than just random. As I said, you are not capable of accepting the truths of existence. So, if we're just random, then there's no meaning to the universe. That is correct. So if there's no meaning in the universe, then what's the point of living? There is meaning. You just contradicted yourself again. No. You can't live a full life. You can't live a life at all. Do you think that meaning is somehow made up? Your species conjures meaning, but operates under a false belief that meaning is a mystical plan. It is not. So, what is meaning? Meaning is what you make it. Okay, moving on. You said we humans would die as a species. So, tell me, when does the nuclear war start?